Hey guys, we're Agora Sounds, a professional composition duo, and recently we were commissioned by the Kingdom Arcade to write some theme tracks for some of their top level players and influencers.
For those of you that don't know, the Kingdom Arcade is a fighting game community, and they hold a number of professional players in games like Tekken, and even host the Oh Boy Body Hours tournament once a week. One of those top players is JT, also known as Cha-Cha Maru or the BlackNyackGod, BNG.
JT has consistently placed highly in many locals and major tournaments, and is considered the final boss of the KA community.
Due to his acquisition of the moniker BlackNyackGod, we were asked to write a holy yet epic track, kind of in the style of Azazel's Chamber from Tekken 6, or that one famous Halo song.
So going into this track, what we knew right off the bat was we wanted to set up this brooding, dark energy to really kick off the beginning of this track. And the whole foundation for this is just built off of one male choir line that just moves back and forth between two chords. Very, very simple, very easy to structure, easy to write through. It's just a high voice moving up above, and then a lower voice that's really anchoring down on those low notes. So here's an example of that right now. And you could really hear that movement go back and forth. It just keeps up that same theme. The energy slowly starts to build as we move into more of our percussion section, which Alex is going to touch on in a bit.
Okay, so one of the biggest things we wanted to get done with this track was to add some of the most epic percussion we could get. And thankfully, we bought Complete a while back, so we have a lot of these big, epic percussion kits. One of my favorites here is Action Strikes, and I'll give you a listen to that now. And it has this big boom, ba-da-boom, boom, ba-da-boom, boom sound. So we thought, what's the only thing we could do that would increase that? Damage. And I'll give you a listen to that now. We realized that with all these massive percussive sounds, we needed something organic to kind of bring back the sound of a god of Blacknyak, perhaps. So one thing we wanted to add was a djembe. So one thing that's really fun about the djembe is that it adds a lot of resonance to everything you say. And we thought, well, if we're going to have that resonance coming in, why don't we kind of use a djembe, hit some drums, and double the action strikes. So I'm going to cut to that now.
So now here we've made it to the first big arrival point in the composition. This is where the energy really comes to a head for the first time in the orchestra section. And we needed to keep up this energy, and we needed to keep up the sense of momentum. And one of the things that we did to achieve that was write this high spiccato string line. So you hear just the violins and the upper strings moving around. You can hear it just like slowly peaking, like the energy that it's creating is it's moving forward, but you can tell it wants to keep jumping higher and higher. And that's that tension that we want to hold through, and that energy that we want to continue to expand upon as we move through that string section, which actually bleeds really well into this interesting little line that we wrote. It's a dueling harp and flute section. It's one of those things that gets kind of hidden in the background, but it adds a little extra sense of circular motion, which really adds to this flow and this energy. I think it's really, really cool. It's literally just a flute, a solo flute, and a harp, just playing back and forth the exact same line, one coming in right after the other. It's just the smallest of little details, but we'll give it a listen right now. So here comes the flute, there's the harp, flute again. And you hear that. You hear it's just the exact same line, exact same octave, but these different timbres and this entrance one after the other. It's just this nice little touch of detail that I'm personally a really, really big fan of. And I love how this plays out into the track.
So as a lot of you guys know, I'm actually more from a hip hop and an EDM kind of background. So for me, I wanted to add something that was kind of the style and the sound that in hip hop is going to add that tension and release every time. And of course, I'm talking about risers and downlifters and all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, within Complete, we also had a kit called Rise and Hit that kind of does exactly that, but specifically for orchestral sounds. So I'll play you that right now. And as you can hear, that just adds a really rich, huge drop to every time we needed it. And we kind of dotted that a bunch throughout the track, because it just brings up and down. Now, if you've ever listened to or watched any score or soundtrack, you'll know there's one thing that always brings the epic to the next level. And of course, I'm talking about epic brass, or in this case, specifically horns. So what we wanted to do was get this big French horn lead straight out of Metropolis Arc to add this massive size horn kind of bursting through the track. And I'm going to play that right now. And I think one of the things that made this horn line so interesting was that it kind of had this rise and drop and rise and drop, while also adding in some of these shorter notes in between that kind of give it this long, drawn out, epic feel, kind of like you're fighting something above your level.
So now our big horn solo section has ended, and it's time for our first big break in the track. We know we wanted to keep up the energy, but we didn't want to resort to just going back to straight choir on its own, because we feel like a lot of that energy that we cap at just drops and bottoms out when you just go straight to choir alone. So we needed to add in some orchestral movement to really make sure everything keeps going. Like, you can tell the energy is shifted, and it's not the exact same that you hear in this big bombastic horn lead. But we needed to build up that sense of anticipation for that second half. So what we wound up doing was we just changed a couple of movements within the inner parts of the orchestra. Like, for example, you hear that high string line. It's not quite staccato anymore. There's a lot more like ascending and descending. It carries the same theme. That carries throughout, and then you hear this lower string section anchoring on this one note. Bom, bom. That's definitely not the correct pitch, but the idea is still the same. This low string section actually mirrors the choir, which holds on this one chord, this open C sharp to G sharp. Mirrors on that open chord, never changes, always holds that anchor down. So it's just chugging, 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 chugging along. And we needed to make sure that that carried out throughout energy-wise in the choir. We threw the female choir back in just so we can have another sense of staccato moving along with the string line. We'll play you an example of that right now. You hear those short bop, 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 bop. And that really just adds an extra layer of depth to this. What winds up being a little bit troubling is that just keeping this on its own really just kind of drags along and doesn't make it too interesting for the second half, but Alex is going to touch on that a little more in a bit.
So for that second half of this break, we wanted to add something that kind of brings back the epic a bit, maybe adds a new element to the mix, some kind of sound that wasn't in there before. And we realized we have all these orchestral things, we have these massive percussion, what's something that's missing? Metal. So we decided, why do we add a metal guitar? So we ended up using a guitar called Shreddage 3, which is made by Impact Soundworks. So we threw that in and wrote this little solo out, which I'll play right now. So we had all these long notes, and we realized that if we cut them down at the half notes, it actually added this whole extra tension and excitement to it. And then, in one of my favorite parts of the music process, I just ran it through a ton of effects. Some destructors, guitar rigs, reverbs, RC20s, even a bit of kickstart, just a bit of everything to make that guitar just smash through the mix. While we were there, we also thought, why not add some extra brass back in? So we added some cymbasi and some trumpet, adding these kind of staccato brass lines over the top, which kind of fill out that frequency spectrum a bit, and also let the guitar kind of have that kind of vibe expanded upon.
For this final big energy drop in the track, we knew we wanted to bring back a lot of old thematic material, but we wanted to add just a couple of notable changes to really give it a sense of freshness, a sense of something new is happening, and we're not just going and copying and pasting. So one of the things that we did to achieve that was right here in the horn lead. This is actually really interesting. We take the horn lead, and the first half of this just mirrors this choir intro, but it's a change of meter. So let's listen in on that right now. Like, you can hear that movement. Bum, 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 bum. We've heard this before already in the choir, but since it's focusing more on the changing of the meter, and less so on replicating that exact motif, like beat for beat, it gives it a sense of just something is familiar, but something is different, and it really just kind of adds a little extra layer of oomph to this horn lead, which builds into just the high peak energy that we wanted to save for the end of this track. And that's just a little snippet of that, but you can really feel that difference more so than you can hear that difference, which is, oh man, that's exciting. This is one of my favorite parts for writing this whole thing.
Finally, since we already brought back that horn for that choir intro sound, there was no better time than to just bring in that full final drop, which just kind of rounds out the track. And yeah, let's BNG come to victory at the end of every match. And yeah, that's kind of the entire track. Just a lot of massive sounds, a lot of huge orchestral hits and rises and up and down motion and running between two chords. And that was kind of what we built the whole track around.
So yeah, like Alex was talking about, that's our entire process, start to finish. I think one of my favorite takeaways from this entire experience that we went on is the idea that something big and epic sounding like this can really just be born from the smallest of ideas. Remember how we talked about in the beginning, literally the entire foundation for this composition, this track, which is built off of that male choir line. Just that one small little bit just gave way to all of these ideas that shaped and evolved and created something like we were so satisfied with and so happy with. So take those small ideas that you have and just run as fast and as far with them as you can, because you can get something that's pretty much as great as this, if not amazing and spectacular in its own way. Like that, I just love.
And as always, if you like what you see, just remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I don't know, hit us up on Instagram. And if you're a game developer who needs some music done, remember to hit us up. Our socials are all in the description. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video where we'll show off some more music. And I'm excited to see you all again. Bye.
This is where the energy really comes to a head for that first drop in the orchestra section. The orchestra.